Coming up today, Scott Seaton has always had a passion for creating art and telling a story through his work. His story, though, is unlike many others. Scott was ready to donate his kidney until he ended up needing a kidney himself. Today, we see how he's doing years out from his transplant and how he's using his art to pay it forward. Good morning, I'm Jessica Lovell, and welcome to the Morning Medical Update. 15 years ago, Scott Seaton was one step away from donating a kidney to his mother. Then he found out he also needed a transplant. Scott is here in studio with us today, along with transplant surgeon Dr. Tim Schmidt across from me. Dr. Schmidt is also the director of transplantation here at the health system. Also in studio with us is Dr. Jeff Klein. He is a nephrologist. He also specializes, of course, in treating kidney conditions, and you are Scott's nephrologist currently. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And Scott, 15 years out from a kidney transplant, oftentimes docs, we hear people right after they get out of a transplant and just how they're doing and moving forward in those first initial steps. But 15 years out, how are you doing and how are you feeling?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really well, actually. I mean, it's such a blessing to make it this long and keep going, and they're taking real good care of me to keep adding years on to this kidney. A lot in my life has changed from that day. I mean, I was a single person going into a transplant, and now I'm married with 3 kids, and they're 10, 9, and 6.
So what do you tell the kiddos?
Just, I don't know.
Do you talk about your transplant with your family?
A little bit, but not too much yet.
It's just part of who you are?
Yeah, I mean, we always test them. We have a running urine test every checkup, just to make sure the kidneys are good. They know about it, but not too much detail for the kids. They're still pretty young.
We'll talk about that as far as the genetics behind it all, but your journey to a new kidney, pretty remarkable because your mom needed a kidney and both you and your brother happened to be a match. Is that correct?
Correct.
So tell us about, you got to paint this big picture because we're starting to, I always say you have to kind of paint a diagram of who donated to who and who ended up with whose kidney.
So my mom was going through dialysis, and my brother and I started the donation process. So started doing the testing in the labs and everything. And for whatever reason, they picked me to go first in the testing. So I went through all that testing, full day of, well, it was more than a day, but a lot of tests. And then at the end of it, they found out that I needed a kidney as bad as my mom. I was about 18% kidney function. And I didn't really know it and didn't really feel it. Like, it's not like a stomach pain where you know something's wrong. It just kind of gradually fails, but you don't really know it. Looking back, you could maybe pinpoint it, but in the middle of it, you're not really sure. So my brother ended up, instead of testing for my mom, started to match towards me, and we ended up being a perfect match in our blood antigens. So it worked out well there. And then my mom received her kidney from her brother, my uncle.
Wow, and how's mom doing?
She's doing great.
And uncle's doing well?
Doing well. Everyone in the family is doing really well.
So your kidneys were functioning at 18%, and Dr. Klein, that's a story we hear a lot, is that you don't really know how sick you are until you find out how sick you are, and you get that transplant, and then you're like, wow, I feel so much better. But looking back, what does it mean to operate on 18% of kidney function?
Well, when you're young, you can, I think, get away with a lot that you don't know about. The kidney disease is subtle. Most people don't have symptoms. They may have some changes in urine that can get detected, but for a lot of people, as far as their day-to-day, they don't feel any different until their kidney function is pretty poor. And so, particularly in Scott's case, where he seems to have some sort of genetic predisposition to kidney disease, but we don't know what that is. Having done the testing, everything came up negative. And that was just a couple of years ago that we met, that we did the testing. So I think that's one of the challenges in kidney disease, is that it isn't this big, obvious smoking gun. It's something that is much more subtle for many people.
So no idea what would have caused the kidney failure?
Well, we know that it's some subset of what we call glomerulonephritis, where the filters get inflamed and slowly fail over time. So patients can have protein in the urine, blood in the urine. But as far as symptoms, there can be few, if any. So in patients like that, it's important to see a doctor regularly, particularly if you know there's a family history, so that things can get checked out.
So at 18%, how long would he have had? How long can you operate at 18% before you start going down, 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 and start to feel those symptoms?
Yeah, it depends a lot on how quickly people got there. That for people that lose function quickly over weeks, then they get symptomatic pretty much right there, or under 20%. For a lot of people, though, if they've had a gradual change in their kidney function, then they may not have symptoms until a little bit later, into the kind of lower teens, maybe even 10 or below.
So I want to talk about the genetics behind it. We have son and mother, and now Scott mentioned he has 3 children. So what does it mean as far as testing, genetic testing, and down the road for the kids?
Well, genetic testing is still, I'd say, maybe somewhere between its infancy and its early years. It's something that we use and is actually recommended now in guidelines for individuals that we diagnose with kidney disease to check. That for individuals that are young, there appears to be some predisposition in many cases toward kidney disease, and it may help us figure out ways to extend the kidney function over time.
Scott, tell us about that urine test that your children take. What is that, and what is it looking for?
It's just an annual checkup to monitor their urine, make sure there's not proteins, and I mean, the doctors know what they're looking for.
Yeah, so what's in there, and what can you tell from those urine tests?
Yeah, it's probably as simple as a urinalysis. That really you're just looking for abnormalities in the blood. So if the filters don't work, then you can spill protein or blood or white blood cells, and that's something that can be pretty easily detected on standard testing.
All right, Dr. Schmidt, how do we test family members to find out if they can become a living donor? What is that process like? Educate us.
I think it starts first with a screening phone call. A lot of times someone will call in to say, hey, I want to be a donor, and then they'll kind of go through a questionnaire to make sure they don't have medical problems, they don't have things like diabetes or hypertension, they're otherwise healthy, and then after they pass a screen phone interview, then we'll bring them in for testing. And the testing could include first starting with the blood type and cross-match to make sure they match the recipient, and then you go through the labs, the scans, and kind of the psychosocial evaluation to make sure they're doing it for the right reasons and there's no coercion or any other things that we can detect that would be not in the patient's or the donor's interest.
And you always say, you know, when the donor is the person that comes into the hospital, and we're working to make sure they're the most healthiest person in here, right?
Yeah, that's why Dr. Coomer, who does most of our donors, is bald and stressed out looking because he has to operate on healthy people. The only person in the whole hospital that doesn't need an operation is the one who we take the most care of, because it's really stressful operating on donors because they are perfectly healthy otherwise, and the only thing they can do is get worse.
Exactly. So yeah, no pressure there. So of course the choice to have Scott move forward in that donation ultimately saved his life. But tell me what makes him what would have made him a good candidate at that point?
He was young. Before he knew it, thought he was otherwise healthy. The labs detected that his kidneys weren't functioning. And so those two things, if you're healthy, young, those are great donors. And then matching, you know, if you're the right compatible blood type, and then the donor does not make antibodies against the recipient, and family members tend to have more things alike than they do not alike, so that makes them good matches sometimes.
Scott, what was it like going through that process for someone listening who might go, I wonder if living donation is for me? What can you explain to them?
It's definitely worth it. I mean, even at the minimum, they will find something out if you have something wrong just through the testing. But I mean, people care, and you care about family members and loved ones, and that's what pushes you to donate. And then I would do it to an anonymous donor as well. I just happen to be on the other side of it, going through it. But I mean, the thought was always there to help someone else. And like the same with my brother, when it was kind of a crazy family discussion when it realized, okay, mom and son need a kidney basically at the same time. So we got our transplants a year apart from each other, and it was a lot of emotional discussions on how we're going to move forward and stuff, and we kind of went the direction that we did. We're advised to certain ways, and it all worked out really well. So almost 15 years later, and 16 for my mom, it's been an incredible ride since.
What a story to tell. Dr. Schmidt, you don't hear a lot of stories where somebody comes in to get evaluated. They're like, I'm ready to be a donor, and then they have to quickly turn into being a patient on the other end of that story.
Yeah, I mean, his story is really fascinating because it helped, it probably saved your life and saved you from a lot of suffering and pain down the road. But then, yeah, we do find things like cancer or something that the patient didn't, or the donor didn't know they had, and we discover something that could help them save their life. So I think your story is great, that you were helped, your brother helped you, and then your mom still got helped. It was,
yeah, it's wild.
that would have been some family discussions about who's first and who's helping who.
Yes.
A lot of logistics to
Yeah,
work
yeah.
out. And speaking of logistics, so you've got, Scott now has 3 kidneys.
Yeah.
Remind us why that is.
We put the new kidney in the pelvis, sew it to the blood vessels that go to the leg, and then hook it right into the bladder there. So it's more superficial than where the native kidneys are. So taking the native kidneys out is a big operation, and sometimes they still make a little bit of urine, and they still have hormone production, and then the adrenal glands are right on top of them, and you don't want to put somebody through something that they don't need.
So it's just not necessary to take
Yeah,
that out.
No.
It's Donate Life Month. It's April. Remind everyone why it's so important to have conversations with your family members, about your wishes in death, and to pick up the phone call and educate yourself about being a living donor.
I mean, there's just sheer supply and demand. There are 120,000 people on lists for liver, kidney, heart, and only about 20,000, 25,000 donors a year. So the proportion of people who need is not covered by the amount that's given. So we certainly need more people to donate organs. And even last night we had a chain that was started by someone who gave a kidney just for wanting to give it to anybody, and then that kicked off a chain, and last night we got a donor from outside of our region, a living donor. And so some of these things are fascinating.
Those stories never get old. And we've done, what, 10, 12 kidney chains? Explain how those work.
A chain is where, say, Scott and I were a pair, and I did not match with him, and so, but I still wanted to give. And so my kidney would go to someone else. That kidney, that their donor wasn't matched to their recipient, it could go to Scott. And then you can just expand it to multiple pairs, and sometimes they're as big as 10. I think the biggest one is 50 pairs in the nation.
Yeah.
At one time.
It keeps growing.
Yeah.
'Cause it used to be that you would have one person donate directly to another, and now the expansion of these chains can take a couple of weeks to actually close.
Yeah.
We started this chain probably a week or 2 ago, and slowly the kidneys kind of come in, fly out.
Well, and the conversations change. You have somebody who comes in, wants to donate. If I'm related to Scott, I'm ready to donate to this person that I know and love. And then you're telling me, well, wait, it's not going to be Scott. It's going to be this person you've never met. And then you have to start having these different conversations, and the story completely changes.
Mm-hmm.
But you would be surprised, and the donors will say, yeah, I'm up for that.
I'm game.
They don't say, no, I only wanted to go my family member. They just want to give and help somebody, and it's going to help their recipient in the end. But it's amazing how it works out.
That's why we talk about living donation, because it reaches far and wide. Scott, you are an incredible artist, very talented, and if you visit the health system, the heart center here at the health system, or even just come through our front doors, you're going to see your work of art. So it's very cool. I pass this big heart every day, and I had no idea you were the man behind it. So you have been involved with the Parade of Hearts. You designed the one in front of our heart center. So tell us about it.
Yeah, so the Parade of Hearts, it started kind of to give back to charities during COVID and stuff like that, small businesses and stuff, and it just kept growing. There was such a turnout for it. So after the first year, I thought I need to do one of these, and I know exactly what I want to do is an organ donation heart. And so I kind of came up with this theme of the green ribbon that signifies the donor life, and that was kind of my inspiration is by becoming a donor, it literally saved my life, and also donors have saved my mom's life, and friends. I've had friends that have had donors and colleagues that are organ donors and transplant recipients, and it was kind of just to raise awareness to the situation of bring more living donors in, so it doesn't always have to be a tragedy to save someone's life, and one donor can save 8 lives potentially too, you know. So I had like QR codes on there to go to the registry to get donor, and there's also blood, you know, to donate blood as well to help with any medical needs.
So your outreach really is about not just telling your story, but really giving people kind of this call to action. Here's where you go, here's what you do, here's where you go to get more information, right?
Yep.
Dr. Klein, how important is that?
It's extremely important, both as Scott mentioned, there's always need from an American Red Cross standpoint for simply blood donation, platelet donation, and then organ donation is a gigantic need that we're always asking for donors and trying to find ways to make things possible for these folks that are waiting on dialysis trying to find a kidney.
And great to know people like Scott are out there in the community spreading the word. And you're on the list to make another heart this year. What could you tell us about it?
I am. This one's a little different. It's geared more towards the aquarium at the zoo. It's a little more fun and playful, but you can go see it this weekend. There's a big kickoff where they show 100. There's 100 artists this year, and it's at the American Royal from like 10 to 3, and they're all in one spot before they get taken out into the wild. But there's some really good ones with some powerful messages too.
There's something about seeing those hearts around town. I don't know why. Just when I see them, I was like, there's one. And then it just and then to find out the story behind it just makes it all the better. So nice work. Keep it up. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Be sure to ask your questions. Use the chat on YouTube or Facebook. We are on the X platform, or you can email the Medical News Network. The information is right there on your screen. And while you send in your questions, we'll check on the COVID count for the week. There are 12 active inpatients at the health system as of Monday. That does include 1 person in the ICU, but not on a ventilator. The census has stayed in the low teens for a few weeks now and even reached into the single digits last week. We're going to hear more from Dr. Hawkinson and Dr. Stites tomorrow on Open Mics with Dr. Stites. Let's get to some questions from our viewers. What's been the biggest change that you noticed after transplant? If you can remember back 15 years ago, what was that biggest change?
Oh, immediately having the energy, like a week after the transplant was just so much more energy than I had going in, because I was able to stay off dialysis before my transplant due to the living donor, and it was I was pretty low. I was in the single digits of kidney function before I got my transplant. So after I mean, it's been, the energy level's been back up, and it just gives you a whole new appreciation for life, and
But here you are.
Yeah.
Randy wants to know, does having 1 kidney count as a pre-existing condition? So if I donate, does that make my future health insurance more complicated?
No. Thanks to the Affordable Care Act, no healthcare conditions are protected.
Vivian says, thank you. April 30th, I'll be celebrating 10 years with her kidney transplant. So great. Thank you for sharing, Vivian. Jeremy wants to know, how long are people typically on the transplant list before they might receive a kidney? A deceased donor is what he would be talking about.
It's increasing in time. I think our wait time is now up in 3.5 to 4 years.
Yeah, we're probably getting closer to 4 years. I'd say between 3 and 4.
Has that been growing over steady over time?
Yeah, there are multiple reasons for that. I would just say for anybody that's interested in donation, whether that's living or whether that's signing your donor card, all of that helps shorten the wait for other people, that there is continuous need.
Becca wants to know, do you take any medications still after this transplant? Kind of what has been your post-care?
Yeah, I've been taking medicine every day, twice a day really, immunosuppressant medicine to help fight off any kind of antibodies, trying to reject the kidney, the foreign tissue. It's changed a little bit over the years, so I had some it's kind of shifted from like a prograph regiment for a lot of years to now later post. As the years keep going on, I've switched to like an infusion to kind of get me off of the tacromylus. It's kind of a fine line on the tacromylus levels that you have to keep, because it can be damaging to the kidney, but it also helps keep it alive. So
is that pretty typical for someone post kidney transplant throughout the long haul of life?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about the early days of transplant. The long-term care is different, and when Scott met me, he was losing kidney function quickly. He had more protein in his urine, and so we switched around his medicines and got him off one of the medicines that can cause some of that, and onto a once-a-month IV medicine. And that's really helped his kidney function over time and lowered the protein in his urine. So we've been, I think, lucky to have other options, and that's why we continue to follow people on the transplant side over years, is that the technology and the medicine changes, and that evolution allows us to permit longer care with one kidney.
Well, speaking of changes, someone would like to know, and we'll start with Scott, wants to know from all of you, like, how helpful do you think social media has been as far as outreach and finding a living donor?
Oh, I think social media has been a big help. I mean, it spreads so much faster because a friend of a friend, and you share a story, and it just keeps going and growing. And I think it's incredible to do the social media aspect of it.
Yeah, Dr. Schmidt, you start to hear all these different ways that people are coming up and getting creative, and who cares? You just want them to find someone. So what are your thoughts on it?
I think the hardest part would be for someone to ask for help, and that's just a national problem where if I have disease, my worst fear is I can't take somebody else's kidney. I don't want to ask them for it. So there's been classes, and the American Kidney Foundation even put on the donor advocacy group where someone will help you with your social media platforms to go out there and announce that you do need help, and then that will be a way for you to reach thousands of people to help you.
Hard to ask for anything.
Yeah, social media has helped a lot of people.
Hard to ask for anything these days, but when asking for a kidney or an organ, that's tough. But don't you find that people want to help if they know they could do it? They want to help, and what a great way to reach people.
Yeah, what we found over time is that people want to help. They may not know what somebody needs. And so most donors come out of friends and family. And an easy way to reach them is through social media. That's why we have a lot of families that try to help each other, try to help that recipient create some sort of social media coverage, some sort of page that can get shared with others. And from there, we've had a lot of connections.
I bet. So here's a question. I saw a headline recently about an equation for calculating kidney function that gave different results based on someone's race. How does race affect kidney function?
So there were older formulas that actually incorporated race, particularly African American race, into the kidney function formulas. Those have all been eliminated, and they've kind of redrawn out those measurements for kidney function that can be extrapolated to different populations. Okay,
this question always comes up. What's up with the guy in the news who is living with a pig kidney?
Well, that's fascinating. Since I was a medical student in the 90s, they've been trying to do xenotransplantation, where you take an organ from someone who's not human and place it into a human and make it work. And the recent data has shown that they can eliminate all the genes that we cross-react against and can't make the immunosuppression work, and have been able to successfully transplant that into a pig into a human. So that is something that may help with the need for donors in the future. It's still quite a few years off for mainstream, but it's definitely hopeful for people who can't find a donor, or the donors that there's just not enough out there, that we might be able to eliminate some of that need by.
Yeah, certainly a headline. And a headline, 15, 20 years ago, you would have thought, there's no way. Yep. And now what do you think about that when you see it?
I think there are a lot of possibilities that it may standardize some of the ways that you are able to use donors, particularly in individuals that don't have time to wait for a human kidney. So there's absolutely potential there. The studies are ongoing.
Scott, you had mentioned about that you went first in getting the transplant. How did you and Mom decide that, and then how did you two support each other during and after the process?
Well, I mean, when I say I went first, it was between my brother and I donating to my mom. I went first, like
Getting your testing.
Getting my testing, yeah. If my brother went first, I would have found out the hard way, I think.
Right.
You know? I mean, she immediately said, no, your brother needs yours. I'll find mine somewhere else, or, you know, she was very selfless.
Because brother could have given to either.
Yeah.
And Scott was more in need. Is this
Yeah.
correct?
I think your mom was just going to make you do what you wanted to do. Your mom was in charge.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Mom was the boss.
You are not getting out of that.
Yeah.
You're going to do what Mom says.
And actually, my brother and I matched better than we did to our mom, like us as a pair.
So it worked out.
Yeah.
How do you all support each other?
I mean, just talking. I mean, it's kind of a wild experience to go through, but it's so, I don't know what the word is. It's an emotional thing, but it's also just insanely gratifying afterwards. You know, like it's you know, we joke around and, oh, thanks for saving my life 15 years ago. It's no big deal, you know. To
All in a
him.
day.
But yeah,
Yeah.
like you really appreciate it day to day, the fact that you're getting this second chance at life to try and make the most of it, you know. And my brother's doing awesome as a living donor. Like, nothing really changed for him. He actually, when I say be a donor, you'll find something out. He had a heart ablation. They found, I don't remember what it's called.
Wolf Parkinson White.
Parkinson White. And they did a heart ablation the day before the transplant. So he actually got wheeled into the operating room the day before to kind of fix some loop wires in his heart.
And then on down to the transplant center next.
Yep.
Just remind everyone, Dr. Schmidt, that it's pretty safe to be a living kidney donor.
It is. I mean, the proper workup and the evaluation, your risk of dialysis as a donor is the same as the general population for those people who we use as donors. So I think what he's saying about the emotional gratification and the saving of your family member's life to keep them around a lot longer than waiting on the list, I mean, there's a win-win for the donors.
What's the big takeaway from our conversation today?
I think seeing how people get a new perspective on life, and there are times where people are complaining about, I feel so bad, I worry about this and that, but then you really see people who were sick and then they become better, and then their whole outlook on life is what, you know, perspective is very important, and donation and helping people out is something that a lot of people can do, and we need people to give organs.
Yeah, I know that's been very gratifying for you and your partners to watch people continue on down that road.
It's my favorite. That's my favorite operation, is the kidney living donor, because we can change people's lives, and we're just, you know, facilitators of that. Whereas other operations, you know, are big deals, but this one is really has a lot of psychological effects on us as well.
Great. Dr. Klein, what's the big takeaway?
For anybody interested in donation, then find a transplant center and call to express your interest if that interest is in living donation. If deceased donation is a possibility for you, then please sign your donor card and find ways to make that possible.
Great message. Scott, you're incredibly active in the transplant community now. We're so glad you're doing well. Thank you for sharing your story. What do you want people to take away from it?
Just get out there and donate. You know, when you go to the DMV, become an organ donor. So you can save, if something tragic happens, you can save somebody else's life and help another family. I think that's really important. And just enjoy life. I mean, it's awesome.
We'll be on the lookout for your hearts.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for being with us today. Thanks to all of our guests. Thanks to our viewers, as always, for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 8. Maternity deserts in Kansas. More and more women are facing long drives to deliver their babies. I'm Jessica Lovell on the next Open Mics with Dr. Stites. How far is too far for adequate prenatal and maternity care? The challenges and solutions in ensuring every mother receives the care she deserves. Wednesday at 8.
Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcast. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.